do it in open session because it's the budget. Yeah. Are we ready, Ms. Golson? I call the meeting to order.
Madam Chair, I move that we return to open session.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Ms. Golson?
Certification of closed session. Whereas the Dinwiddie County School Board has convened a closed meeting on this date pursuant to an affirmative recorded vote and in accordance with the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, and whereas paragraph 2.2-3712 of the Code of Virginia requires a certification by the school board that such closed meeting was conducted in conformity with Virginia law. Now therefore be it resolved that the Dinwiddie County School Board hereby certifies that, to the best of each member's knowledge, only such business matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered by the school board. Dr. Elaine Pearson.
I
District
certify.
1, Dwayne Walker, District 2,
I certify.
Barbara Pittman, District 3,
I certify.
Mary Benjamin, District 4,
I certify.
Jason Brown II, District 5.
I certify.
Madam Chair, all certified.
Thank you. At this time, would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Pardon me? No, you're right. Ms. Golson, are there any amendments?
No.
Thank you. Ms. Benjamin?
Madam Chair, I move that we accept the agenda as printed.
I need a second.
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 There is a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? The motion does carry. Closed session report.
I move that we approve the personnel list as presented.
I second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. The budget work session, which is why we're in here today.
I think we are, yes, we're going to start with the student matters.
Okay.
Yeah, we're going to start with a student matter presentation by Dr. Clay. The board, we've been trying to, as part of our orientation process, talk about some of the big kind of things that we are working on here in the school district, and the student code of conduct has been one of those areas. So Dr. Clay is going to shed some light on that area for us.
A little bit
tonight.
of light.
Yes,
It's a deep topic.
yes.
So, Student Matters, we're going to talk about a few things with this evening, but I will say this is going to cover the surface because all these pieces are complex. So this evening will be an overview, and then of course, if you have questions, I will definitely answer those. If not tonight, you may have questions as we go on throughout the school year, but I'm always available to answer those. So, let me get my clicker ready. Maybe? Okay, thank you. All right. So 3 pieces we will discuss this evening are PBIS, I'm going to explain what that is, our student success process, and then the code of conduct. All these pieces are really about what we're doing to meet the needs of students, support students, and then teach students appropriate behavior. I love this quote, it's several little pieces to it, but if a child doesn't know how to read, we teach. If a child doesn't know how to swim, we teach. If a child doesn't know how to multiply, we teach. If a child doesn't know how to drive, we teach. If a child doesn't know how to behave, what do? So there's teach or punish. There's still a teaching component to this, right? And that is really where PBIS comes in, okay? PBIS is positive behavioral interventions and supports. School systems across the nation use this. School systems in Virginia use this. But it's really about an evidence-based framework. It's tiered supports and interventions that could be about behavior, academics, social, emotional, mental health. And when implemented with fidelity, it does show improvement for students. So on the next slide, and I believe you have a copy of these as well, it's a pretty common framework that you will see when you think about tiered interventions it's a triangle where about 80 or more % of your students should be in that tier 1, that bottom, that green area, right? Meaning most of what I do in the classroom when you think about behavior, like teachers' expectations, routines, the rules, relationships, that should work for the majority of students. And then you have the yellow tier, which is about 7 to 10%. And for us, that's about 287 to 410 students should be there. I think we may be a little off right now of that. But they need a little more support. They may need a mentor or different things. And then you have your tier 3, which is the red piece at the top, which is about 3 to 5% of your students in Dinwiddie. That should be about 123 to 205 students. And again, you know, we may be a little off of that, but that is really your intensive support. Students that maybe need a functional behavior assessment, a behavior intervention plan, and a lot more teaching maybe than other students need. But that's kind of the framework of tiered supports that PBIS is built off of. So when you think of the big components, it is building positive relationships, which we know works for students and is a very integral piece of not just behavior, but academics, right? Teaching, modeling, practicing clear expectations, and then acknowledging appropriate behavior. So I will say in each of our schools, principals have teams that have PBIS working in different ways. So like at Sutherland, they have Bark Bucks, and at Southside, they have the Bee Store, and Sunnyside is Mustang tickets, and the middle school has different activities, really incentives for the students that are doing the right things. Which again, we do know is the majority of our students. So they each have different systems. Dinwiddie Elementary, I believe, presents to us next month, and they'll talk about their house system, which is part of their PBIS dynamic. So that is, again, the surface level of PBIS that's happening in each of our buildings, again, to teach appropriate behavior. So all behavior is a form of communication, right? Think about a baby. When they cry, they need something. It's communication. So when students have different behaviors, there's a reason for that. And that's kind of where our student success process comes in. And again, very surface level. I will send this presentation to you because there's a link there to some things about student success. You also have a printed copy of our manual in the folder that I gave you earlier. So basically, when any student is presenting with behavioral challenges, academic challenges, attendance challenges, there should be a student intervention process that begins very simply and authentically with the teacher and the parent. Like, you know, Amanda's having some difficulties. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the student's strengths, areas for growth, and figure out what's really going on to help the student. The teacher is then going to put a plan in place. We call it SST1, but it's really a student intervention plan where they, after they meet with the parent and discuss the problem that is being presented or the difficulty, they put some supports in place, some interventions. You know, if a child has difficulty with reading, maybe that's small group. If a child is having some behavioral concerns, maybe that is, you know, they need a plan, like a check-in, check-out with a trusted adult in the building and where they set goals. It could look a lot of different ways. It's going to look different depending on the student and the need. Okay? They're going to put interventions in place for 4 to 6 weeks, and then they're going to come back and say, okay, do we see improvement in Amanda? Is this working? Or do we need to do something different? So that's really what the process is about. What's going to work for the student? If it's not working, they can put different things in place, and they may bring other people to the table. They may say the counselor needs to be at the table to help us out. The school social worker needs to be here. The math interventionist, whoever they think they need, they bring the right people to the table to try to help the student. And that's really what the process is for. Now, if the child, they do these interventions and there's no progress, then they go to the next step, which is some paperwork they fill out. And then there may be more interventions put in place. You get some more people around the table. And as a very last resort, when we've kind of exhausted everything and there's not progress, the team can say, this is a child that may need to be evaluated. But again, that's not the intended outcome. And it's a very last resort if everything we've tried is not working. So that's the basic piece of that process. And again, that can happen for any student who is presenting with some concerns or challenges. Okay. So the next piece, and also a very big piece, is the code of conduct, which you also have in your folder. I feel like it's on the right side, kind of in the back, if you need another copy of that. So there are lots of pieces to the code of conduct, but we don't make that up. So that comes from the Virginia Department of Education. They have a guidance document out there. It's called Model Guidance for Code of Conduct. Every school system in Virginia is supposed to be using that model guidance to create their code of conduct to make sure we have the right parts and pieces. So we're going to kind of go through a little bit of that, the real purpose of the code of conduct, and then a couple of pieces of it, SBAR codes and leveled responses, just so we understand that there's not this one-size-fits-all approach for every student. Okay, it's not if Amanda does this, this is what's going to happen every single time. There are different pieces we have to look at. So again, when I send you this, the model guidance page is linked there from VDOE, and it provides information, again, on the components. And the aim of this is also very important. It's not just a punitive document. It's about creating positive and a preventive approach to student conduct, which again is where PBIS comes in to play, student success comes into play. It's about being preventive and positive in teaching. It does ask us to provide alternatives to suspension, and then the pieces of it. So the purpose of the code of conduct is about written procedures that address standards of student conduct for enforcement and support. Again, there's more than one piece to this. It's not just punitive. It is how are we supporting students. It outlines the rights and responsibilities of students, parents, and staff to ensure a positive and safe learning environment. So when you look at our code of conduct, you will see the very first few pages are about rights and responsibilities for parents, for students, and for our staff. I'm not going to read through all those this evening, but I do think they are powerful because they are things we point out sometimes when meeting with parents and students of, hey, these are your rights, but these are also your responsibilities. There has to be accountability. So a big piece of the code of conduct are the SBAR codes, which are the Student Behavior Administrative Response. So when you look in our code of conduct, there are several pages with those codes, and there's an explanation for each code, and that begins on page 34, I believe, 33. So beginning on page 33, you see those codes laid out, and there are different categories, and each code is explained. Those explanations, again, come from that model guidance. There are 90 different SBAR codes, and those are the only codes we can use. They come in 6 categories, which I'm going to go over in just a second. And the real purpose of these codes, it's about collecting data. So all of that data is entered into our student portal, which is Infinite Campus, when there are behavior referrals. And of course, it has to be reported to the state. But it also helps us look at data. Like, if we looked at a particular school, like what are the main codes that are happening here? So we can say, okay, is there a problem we need to solve? Is there something we need to do differently? How do we support students differently? It informs school improvement decisions and, of course, the school climate. So the 6 categories are behaviors that impact academic progress, and you'll see a little acronym there in parentheses. Behaviors that interfere with school operations. Relationship behaviors, this is often conflict or things of that nature. Behaviors of a safety concern. Behaviors that endanger self and others, and that could be fighting or different things. And persistently dangerous behaviors. So I will say, With that last one, the PD code, those are all what I'm going to call the major pieces, major things. We don't have a whole lot of those, but all of those would be a level 5 offense. I'm going to talk through levels in just a second. But anytime it's a PD code, those are the most serious infractions that label schools as persistently dangerous. And so they come with the highest level and normally the highest consequences. Okay, so this is the piece that when we have a behavior, there's not, like I said, a one-size-fits-all approach. Administrators, when a discipline infraction occurs, should ask a few questions. So they should say, okay, what was the intent? And again, this is the guidance from VDOE, that we should be looking at intent, and then what was the harm done? We should also look at student history. Specifically, we ask administrators to look at the current year, but they're going to look further back than that. But really, we want to always give students a chance, like maybe last year was a rough year, but this year is better, and this has been the only behavior that's happened this year. So they should look at all those pieces and determine a level. So with each infraction, there is kind of a range of levels. VDOE, again, as part of their guidance, says they recommend the levels in the guidance. Okay, these are you have to at least call it this level, but it needs to be a range. So, for instance, a fight can range from a level 3, 4, or 5, depending on the nature of it and depending on the student history. So they have to look at all of those pieces. They're not always going to say it's a level 4 or it's a level 3. They're going to look at the pieces, look at each incident and each student individually to determine the level of the offense. Another piece with this is it's easy to say just give a consequence. And we do give consequences. In many things, there have to be consequences. But we're also asked to put interventions in place, put supports in place. How are you reteaching the appropriate behavior? So there's not just one element or piece to this when a discipline infraction occurs. It's multifaceted. How are we supporting the student? How are we putting interventions in place? And then sometimes, again, it does need to come with a consequence. Our goal is really to get to the root cause of the behavior, because if we never get to the root cause, guess what? We're never going to fix the behavior. And that's the ultimate goal, is to teach students another way to respond. So again, there are different things. So even when an administrator has a referral, they can't just put they're suspended for 3 days. The state says, no, you have to talk about instructional supports. What's the behavioral intervention you're going to put in place? And then what's the discipline sanction? So the sanction is the punitive piece, right? Maybe that's community service hours. Maybe it's in-school suspension. Maybe it's out-of-school suspension. So on this next page, and again, this is not all encompassing, but in your code of conduct, all the different choices are laid out. So when you look at the code of conduct, at the levels and the responses, and I believe that starts on page 51. The responses are laid out there. Some are split between elementary and secondary. Each level is outlined, and the different responses an administrator can have are outlined there. So they're not going to do all those responses at one time. They have choices, which is the way leveled responses work. When they look at all those pieces, intent, harm, student history, the individual situation, they have to decide what's our step in this moment. So for smaller infractions with a student with no history, they may say, okay, it's a parent contact, it's going to be a check-in, check-out, it's going to be restorative practice, meaning how does the student fix the harm done? For instance, if a student says something not nice to another student, especially at the elementary level, that has to be a teaching moment the first time it happens. So that's why there are choices laid out there. So some examples are on this chart of what instructional supports could be, what behavioral interventions could be, and what the sanctions could be. So with instructional support, we do have to continue instruction in some way. That could look like, for an elementary student, a packet of work goes home and the parent can email the teacher with questions. At the middle school and high school, that could look like they have their Chromebook and they're continuing to do work on Canvas, and the student can email the teacher. It could be an alternative placement like RISE, which we'll talk about in a moment. So again, lots of different choices there. So level of responses, I've kind of already explained that. But again, it's about addressing the root cause and helping students learn the appropriate way to respond in the school setting with their peers and with adults. And with the levels, I will say this. Let's say the first time something happens, the principal says it's going to be a level 2. Well, if they put interventions in place and the behavior continues, the next time they may say, okay, now it's level 3. So that's why it's leveled as well, because if we put things in place and the behavior doesn't change, the levels will continue to rise if the student continues to exhibit that behavior. Okay. So when you think about interventions and alternative placements, I'm not going to read all that to you. These are laid out in the Code of Conduct. This exact verbiage is right there. But some of the programs and pieces that we do offer as interventions or different things, Another Chance is one that you have probably heard before. So when a student has a discipline infraction that involves a substance, vaping, smoking, other like marijuana or other things, there's going to be a punitive aspect to that because we don't tolerate that. But there also has to be an aspect that helps the child, because if they're doing those things, there's a bigger issue going on. So we partner with District 19. I will say we were one of the only districts in Region 1 who was doing that. And the program has been going so well that District 19 actually asked to meet with us earlier this year to talk to other districts in Region 1 about the program and how we use that as an intervention for students. So this takes place at Eastside Enhancement Center on Wednesday evenings. When students are assigned Another Chance, they have to go to 6 sessions. They are 1 hour long apiece. 2 of those sessions, their parent has to go with them. We do offer this for elementary students at a different time than secondary students, but staff from District 19 teach them about the dangers of substance use and abuse. So it's meant to be educational, to really teach students the harm it can do to their body. The next one is prevention services, which was new to us, I feel, 2 or 3 years ago. It is a partnership with Dinwiddie County government. With several of their programs that really we talk about our needs in the school system, and they try to find ways to help us meet the needs of students and support students. So it could be about things like truancy, which is not a discipline piece, but still students need support. But it could also be about students with mental health concerns, challenging behavior, and we do believe this is a powerful partnership, right? One of the things we can do through this is assign community service hours, which we did not used to be able to do. So as part of discipline now, we can assign that, and they help carry that out for us. They also do some small group support at the middle school and the high school level for students with a variety of challenging concerns. Encompass Learning Center is not a behavior placement. I do want to say that, but it is listed here because it's in the Code of Conduct. This used to be Pathways. It is called Encompass now. And really its intention is about students who are 1 or more years behind, meaning they're not on track to graduate on time for various reasons. It could be about students who have anxiety at school and they're getting behind and we're concerned they're going to drop out. It's a smaller environment with Edmentum, which is a virtual platform, but we have licensed teachers there that help students through their work. There are some face-to-face courses. Normally those are electives that are taught as well. And many students in this program have seen great success, whereas they were not successful in the middle school or high school. This has helped them get back on track to graduate on time. RISE is also held in that same building at Historic Southside, but it's an after-school program. This takes place Monday through Thursday from 3 to 6 p.m. And normally it is students who are suspended, long-term suspended, who need some face-to-face support. It can also be students in the middle school or high school that are presenting with challenging behaviors, and the school has gone through interventions and different things, student success, functional behavior assessment, and the behavior's not improving. Students can be assigned here. It's not meant to be a long-term assignment. It is short-term, but we do have licensed teachers there that can assist them with their work. And there's also an administrator there and a security officer there because it is after school hours. We do provide transportation for students who need that. Petersburg Regional Alternative Program is called Keys Academy now. This is located in Petersburg, and it's a regional school, and we share spaces there with Petersburg, Hopewell, Colonial Heights, Prince George, and Sussex. Currently, Dinwiddie has 2 student spaces with Petersburg Regional Alternative, and again, it is for students who are presenting with challenging behaviors. We have tried many things, student success, functional behavior assessment, and they need something different. So it's about meeting the need of the student in a different way. And the last piece is just, many times for the board, when discipline comes to you, just, so you're aware, parents do have the right to appeal. If it is a short-term suspension, they appeal to the principal. That does not come to us. But if it is a long-term suspension or expulsion, parents have the right to appeal. It is outlined in the Code of Conduct. It is outlined in the discipline letter that goes home. I did give you a copy of a template for that letter. And then at the middle school and high school level, they also have an appeal form they will give to parents because it does have to be in writing. So they make sure parents are aware of their rights, and sometimes parents appeal and sometimes they choose not to do that. If they do appeal, normally I would be the hearing officer that would hear that appeal first. Sometimes that can be modified and sometimes it cannot be, and then you'll have cases that will come to you. Okay, so again, that was very surface. It's a lot of information that I just went through as quickly as I could. But what are your questions this evening about that?
Thank you for doing this. I learned something from this. I mean, you might say you skimmed the surface a little bit, but thank you so much for
You're welcome.
giving this to us.
Absolutely.
Dr. Clay, I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
Just trying to figure things out here.
Okay.
Obviously, when handling discipline or something like this, it seems that in a perfect world, everything is absolute, right? So this is right, this is wrong. I think the code of conduct and what I'm seeing here in front of me helps with a lot of that, but there are still some places where relative terminology is used.
Sure.
And so obviously, some of this is left to the discretion of administrators and whatnot.
is.
What policies, and this may be a discussion for another time or place, what policies do we as a county have in place to monitor the discretionary decisions of our administrators? So for example, if a parent believes that a certain child is, there was one particular code I was looking at there, but about lewd behavior or something. One person sees lewd behavior one way, another sees it another way.
Sure.
Do we have a policy in place that allows us to monitor that? Or I'm just curious about that.
There are regulations about the Code of Conduct. I cannot remember the exact letters right now, but there are regulations about the Code of Conduct where we try to specify things a little more for parents, but it doesn't necessarily provide oversight to administrators. So this is what I will say about that. Administrators investigate. We do trust them to do that. And they take their time investigating. So, what they will do when there's an incident is they'll call a parent, they contact the parent and will say, this happened. Can you please allow me some time to do a thorough investigation where they may have to get teacher statements, student statements, sometimes there's video involved, right? And they're gonna look at all those pieces before they make a final decision. Sometimes that looks like I'm calling a parent to say I'm investigating this, but while I'm investigating it, I need Amanda to stay home tomorrow. And then I'm going to call you before the day's over with the final decision. They investigate. When they have questions, they will call me sometimes or call Dr. Weston to say, I'm dealing with this and I just need some guidance and some wisdom. I think they're great about doing that when they're uncertain. They do not jump to just, this is the decision we're going to make. I think the other piece of that would be that the SBAR codes give, they're not perfect, but they give great descriptions of what does this code mean and what does this behavior look like. So I think that does help them a lot when they're looking at things to say, well, no, that's not really what it was. But you're right. Some things are, it could be, there's some subjectivity to that.
I will also say that this past summer, especially at the secondary level, because we do see more infractions at the secondary level, we brought both of the administrative teams in from the middle and the high school so that we could go through each one of the infractions and talk about how they would then impose discipline based on what that infraction is, so we could create some consistency at those levels.
Right.
Because when you have 6th through 12th grade, we want to make sure that what the middle school would call lewd behavior would be the same thing we would call lewd behavior at the high school.
Okay, that's good.
Right.
Now, my other question is kind of a twofold question. We're talking about this administrative response to student behavior, or the SBAR, and it's a threefold response, if I understand correctly. Instructional supports. The first part of my question is, who initiates that process? So is the teacher is not expected to initiate that? Or,
No, so normally what would happen, the teacher does play a part in it, I will tell you that, but normally what would happen, so let's say we have a student that's long-term suspended, okay? If they come to me for an appeal, if they come to you, we're gonna talk about that during that meeting of, okay, what does instruction look like? Now, for a high schooler or middle schooler, it is simpler. I'm not gonna say easy, but it is a little simpler because they have the Chromebook and they can just email the teacher. So they would continue the work on their Chromebook, but the teacher plays a role if the child emails them. There has to be meaningful contact is what VDOE asks us to do.
So,
But the principal or assistant principal is the one that is charged with leading that to make sure teachers know what is happening, and then if a child emails them, to please respond to it with assistance.
so the way I'm viewing this, it seems that this SBAR response, a threefold thing. I'm not an educator. I haven't been, and so I want to be upfront about that. There are other educators here on this board that may have a better understanding of this, but it seems like there's a burden on the teacher when this process is initiated because it falls on them to provide the instructional support, right?
That's true.
And so that leads to the second half of my question about this. We're placing a burden on them, but are we giving them a voice or a role to play in the disciplinary side of it? What role or voice do teachers have in the disciplinary side of this? Because if we're going to ask them to carry a burden in this response, are we willing to also let them have a voice on the disciplinary side? I'm just curious about that because, again, all this is new to me today. So.
Sure. You know, so speaking as a former administrator, and what I believe all of our administrators do, if a teacher writes a referral, they're going to talk to that teacher. The teacher is going to write a statement. The principal or assistant principal is going to go to that teacher to say, talk to me about what's happening, you know, and kind of get their voice in it that way. Now, does the teacher make the discipline decision?
Right.
No, that's the burden of the administrator. The teacher does not make that. Now, what should be happening, let's say if there's a student that's been presenting with challenging behaviors, the teacher is definitely a part of the PBIS piece, the student success piece, what interventions are we putting in place? But when the teacher can no longer, like, the things I'm doing are not working.
Right.
They are asking for help from the administrator. So again, they're not going to make the discipline decision, but I do believe our assistant principals and principals hear their voice. I will say specifically for us at this level, when there have been incidents, and it's not often, but it's just my example, maybe if a teacher is pushed or something happens that directly affects the teacher a little differently, we have tried to make sure before we make a decision, we talk to the teacher.
Okay.
Talk to me about what happened. How are you feeling about this? not letting them make the decision, but definitely hearing their voice and letting them know these are our options, and I want to hear from you before we make this decision that really affects the child, but may also affect the teacher depending on what we decide to do.
So the law requires us to give the parents of the student an opportunity to appeal a decision we make, right?
That's correct.
That's correct.
Right. Because my child was in your school when you were an administrator or a great administrator, but there's always that chance that there's not a good administrator. Do we have a process for our teachers to appeal an administrative decision? So for example, if the teacher feels like this hasn't been addressed adequately and I don't feel like my voice was heard, do they have a way to express that? And the reason I bring this up is as an elected official, we have constituents who are educators, and this is one of the concerns that's been expressed to me, is that there are times when they don't feel supported by administrators. And I wonder, rather than having to come to me as a school board member, do we have a channel for them to get, to make sure, obviously I want them to come to me if they feel the need to, but I would love to be able to look back and say, hey, did you go through these channels first?
Right.
And have we provided a channel for them to express frustration with how the process was handled or whatever?
Sure.
We provide it for the parents, obviously, because the law requires us to. I don't believe the law necessarily requires us to do that for the teachers,
Right.
but maybe just a thought, if there's a way to do that, give them a channel to say, I don't agree with this. And then if it's a matter of, somebody has to make a decision, we at least know that we've documented, we've given them a chance to express that. If there's already something like that in place, that's great, obviously, but.
I don't think there's anything formal like that in place. I will tell you what we always hope would happen, right? We want to assume the goodwill, right, all the time with principals and assistant principals, like
Yes.
Dr. Weston was saying. We have done training with them. I feel like they're all great about calling us when they're not sure about things. What we would hope would happen was that the relationship with the principal, assistant principal, teachers is so great that teachers can go right to the source, because that's where you get what you need normally, right? Is go to the
Unfortunately, I don't
source.
think it always is.
Sure,
think we
I
have some-
understand that.
I think we have some situations in our schools right now.
Yeah.
I think it's not the norm. I think,
Right.
generally speaking, we have some good situations in our schools, but there's that occasion
Sure.
where a teacher feels alienated by
And that's
the-
why I said that's our hope.
Yeah.
That's what we would like to happen. I think if teachers, for whatever reason, feel that that's not working for them, that is what we want them to try to do. Then I do feel like they don't mind reaching out to us and when they need to, or to you. We do not have a formal process of appeal like that, though.
I appreciate you.
I would hope that teacher, staff member would reach to their immediate supervisor first
Right.
and discuss it.
That's
But
right.
if they don't feel supported, or they don't feel like the answer's in the ballpark, they can and should come to the next step and express
That's
their,
right.
their feelings, and they would be heard at a different level. Now,
Yes.
the end result may not be
I
what
understand.
they're asking
And I
for,
can certainly
but they
appreciate that,
need
yeah.
to be heard.
Right.
And I will say that, so I have a superintendent's advisory, and there's a teacher representative from
Oh,
each
great.
school.
That's good.
So I will say that they have used that as a means to say, this is what's happening in our school, and you'd like to see this addressed. But I think that, as Ms. Pittman said, what we want to happen first is, I think you should always go closest to where the problem
That's
is
right.
occurring and give that person an opportunity, whether it's the teacher going to the administrator or the administrator going directly to the teacher, and, try to solve it there, and then use all the other proper channels.
Do all of our teachers know who their teacher representative is on that?
Yes,
They
they
are
do.
aware of, okay. Good.
Yeah, they do. But I do agree. I think that, you brought up a valid point that maybe we assume, that they
Right.
know that. And, if I'm a new teacher coming on board, maybe, we need to have something, maybe a regulation in place that says, here's what the parents do. Now, here's what you can do as an employee. I think we have a grievance procedure if we need to do that, but maybe it's something for those less formal types of things that they need support with.
And I'm taking notes as you're
Yes, I am
asking
too.
questions.
I think we've already.
I do appreciate this. This has helped me. I mean,
Sure.
obviously, we've sat through several disciplinary hearings.
Right.
This has actually opened my eyes to a lot of what I've already experienced. So I do appreciate it. It's been very helpful.
Absolutely. And again, it's complex. It's not just
is.
as simple, this is what we do every time. So I think you may have questions moving forward, but
Sure.
I mean, always reach out to me. And I would say with the teacher question, I do think it's a valid point. And I think it's kind of what we expect from parents too. Sometimes parents will come to us first with a concern, and what we try to do is point them back. You know, can you try to talk to the principal or assistant principal and you've got to solve it closest to the issue.
Right.
But if you feel like you need to reach out to us and you've tried, then absolutely do that. So I think it's the same or similar.
So I did have a question.
Yes.
So I know that when you had mentioned Encompass, one of the things that you said preliminarily is that, okay, this is not like a behavioral
That's right.
alternative, you know, it's used for other things.
Right.
And that was, I guess, something I should have known beforehand, but it was a shock to me because I know, like, going through Dinwiddie schools, it was always this thing like, oh, if you're getting in fights or you're a bad student or whatever you're going here. Some students, I remember, we were even talking about, like, oh, you know, like, those kids that go to Rwani are, like, bad kids, quote unquote.
No.
So the reason
makes me
I'm
sad.
mentioning that, and this is what, you know, we were talking about as middle schoolers, so I'm
Sure.
of course rather immature. But the reason I bring that up is because I want to know, like, if we're doing anything to change the cultural perception of an alternative program, especially if it's something that's being used to benefit students that may just need, you know, online, you know, classes, or may need a smaller class environment, or, you know,
Sure.
something that, you know, may trigger, you know, some sort of anxiety disorder or what have you. I wouldn't want that student to get something that's better for them, and then they're demonized for it later on. It's like, oh, you know, you left the middle school and you went off to here, or you left high school and you went off here,
Sure.
and then after graduation, everyone's thinking that, you know, this one student went there when, you know, ultimately it was just to better their own education. Because again, like, up until tonight, I had always been under the assumption that Encompass or whatever it had
It was
been called
Pathways
before,
before,
Pathways
yeah.
before. Yeah, all the students that I knew that went there they were like, oh, you know, I used to fight or I used to get in trouble. I didn't know.
Well,
that
we
it was
had
for-
both there for a while.
Yeah.
But
We
now
did,
Now
yeah.
we have
It
split
used to
it.
be that, yeah.
Now it's
Okay.
Rise separated.
That's
from
right.
Encompass.
So I do think that's where part of that perception has come from. There was a time when it was more about students who were exhibiting behavior, but we did a revamp,
Yes.
a refresh this year, and renamed and did a lot of things, painting, new furniture, and changed the criteria back to what it was really originally meant to be.
That's right.
It was originally meant to be about students who were behind and were not on track to graduate. So I think one thing that we're doing is there was a refresh. That information was shared with staff. It is in the code of conduct. That way it's not about behavior, but it's just continuing to send that message just like we are this evening. It's really about students who are behind. So I think, you know, we're working to change that perception. And, you know, when you talk about Rwani, I will say, I remember being in high school and, you know, if you went to, we didn't have Rwani, but it was like the technical center. There was a perception with that. And we have to continue to work to change that. So I will say a couple things we're doing with Rwani to change that perception and really let students know what a great opportunity that is. Like, you can walk out with a certification and walk into a job after you graduate with a certification you didn't have to pay for. It's an amazing opportunity. Mr. Burke George and Carly Wolfick, I think last year they started doing student tours there. So that has already happened with all of our 8th graders and even our counselors, because sometimes the adults also have the wrong perception of the program. So 8th graders went there, counselors from the high school and middle school, and they're going to do that every year to talk about the opportunities that are there. They just did the same thing with Bright Point. There's no misconception about Bright Point, but it's just to show students these are the opportunities that are ahead of you, and let them see what the possibilities are. So I do think that's a valid point, and we are continuing to work to change that perception.
Yeah, I'd be interested in seeing, you know, what we can do in the future, you know, to help change that. Because, I mean, it's
Yeah.
not only just something that I, as a board member, am thinking, but also I know other
Sure.
people in the community as well. And I mean, I know that was just, maybe 4 or 5 years ago when
Sure.
I was a student here, that was the thought process. So I wouldn't want a student that is doing better for themselves in an alternative program to, you know, be demonized by other students or their community when ultimately it's working out for their benefit. you know?
Sure.
So, you know, the things that we do, like with our elementary schools and our middle school and our high school, you know, that I see on Facebook, like, oh, there's an event going on this weekend, or there's an event, you know, or they're doing things in the community. I think they were just like at a skating rink and, you know, things like
Yeah.
that. Like, I would love to see something similar to that coming out of, like, you know, Encompass and Rwani. If we're not already doing that, you know, at least boosting
Sure.
it so that, you know, again, that perception
Yes.
is not where it is right now.
Right. Thank you for
I
that. We
think
can
that,
brainstorm
you know,
some ways to do
I was
that.
just gonna say that, perception is people's reality
That's
until they
right.
get a different experience. And I think, Mr. George, when they took 250 students to Bright Point. I mean, 250 eighth graders went to Bright Point. That was pretty amazing.
Last
right?
week.
And, and then when they went to visit Romandi, I remember the adults saying, I never thought it was like that.
That's right.
But they'd never been there, but yet they're making choices for who goes there and who doesn't go there based on
That's right.
limited information.
That's
so I
right.
think your point's valid.
It is definitely. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you
Thank
for the information.
I just want to say thank you to Dr. Clay. I think, the intention of this was just to talk a little bit more about the things that are happening that ensure our student success. And as you can see, it is the code of conduct, which kind of has negative connotation to it when you think about code of conduct. But it really is about, there's a lot of things that are in place to ensure the success of our students. And if you remember last month, Christy met with you all to talk about finances, to give you a little glimpse into finances and how decisions are made. And we're going to do the same thing with operations and human resources in the next 2 months as well. So I just want to thank them for pulling that together. Nice job there, Dr. Clay.
And now the superintendent's budget. It's not her budget, but she's presenting our budget. That's right.
So I'm going to ask Kirsty to come forward. I just want to say, I'm going to stand in front of you this evening and talk about the proposed budget for fiscal year 2025. But I'm standing here to present it, but I'm going to tell you that this has, I had I won't say a little to do with it, but it was really a team effort. And I just want to publicly thank Christy Fleming, Amanda Clay, and Jeff Walters, Emily Branch. We've spent hours upon hours upon hours upon hours going through a request, money, to put together, I think, a budget that really clearly does show people what we value here in Dinwiddie County, and that is people, and we value the success of our young people and making sure that success lasts long after they're not with us anymore. So I want Christy she's provided you with a couple of documents, and I know that she provided some when we were together last month, and I just want her to talk through those because you might want to reference them while I'm going through the budget. So I'm going to ask her to do that before we get started.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm quite as tall as Dr.
Yes.
Weston. Okay, so in your packet, I just want to briefly describe what you have. On the left-hand side, there is a legal size document that shows revenue. And on this document, it's got several different columns that mean several different things. So the column that's highlighted in yellow refers to the 24, which is the existing school year budget that was adopted last May. As many of you may remember, the state didn't actually adopt their budget until September. We hope we don't have another repeat of that. But so when the state adopted their budget, then we again had to amend ours and adopt another budget, which we did in October. So the green column shows what that budget looked like, and then the plus or minus column showed the changes there. So the blue columns show the proposed governor's budget that was just released in December. And so this budget that we're showing you tonight is based primarily on that budget. But as you know, the General Assembly has its opportunity to weigh in on that as well. And so the House and the Senate both develop a budget and vote on that. And then the General Assembly comes together and they adopt an overall state budget. So while right now we don't have all of the details in the House and Senate budget, we do have some broad knowledge about what each house has provided and is proposing. So the purple is showing the House budget, and the tan color is showing the Senate budget. So the governor's budget is providing additional $1.2 million in additional state funding, which Dr. Weston is going to talk about in her presentation. So what I want to talk about just briefly is what the House and Senate have out here. Together, they are both proposing good packages for education. They're very supportive of education. The House is proposing to provide an additional $4.5 million for Dinwiddie County in additional funding. The Senate is at $2.4 million in additional funding for Dinwiddie County. Both of them include a 3% salary increase, at least. The House version includes a 3.38% for the next 2 bienniums, in hopes that we will get to and exceed the national average. The House did a presentation that showed what that could actually look like by fiscal year 2028. And of course, you know, we have been pushing that for quite a few years, that, you know, Virginia needs to be above or at the national average for teacher salary. So it looks like they're trying to get there. The other couple highlights is they both are providing some significant funding for at-risk. We don't know what that looks like. You know, they didn't come with like, this is what you want to do. We want you to do with this funding, but it does come with a substantial amount of additional funding. So hopefully we'll know more about that in detail next week. But this just provides you an overview of what the comparison looks like. But right now, we have to build a budget on what we have and what we know. So that is why we use the governor's budget at this point. Our guidance really has been that we should be cautiously optimistic, and we are, that we will receive additional funding when the General Assembly adopts a budget. We just don't know what it's going to look like. And from what we understand, you know, even though they're together, the House and Senate for education, they're not together in all other aspects. So, and of course, the governor, they're really not together on anything that he has proposed. So we think that there may be some, you know, give and take. There's going to have to be some give and take. So we don't know where that's going to be. I'd also just like to point out that I totally lost my train of thought. Well, this is the revenue.
You're not going far from the mic.
Yeah, I know. I don't know. It just went right out of my head. We do hope that we have a budget before we get too much further. And, you know, we're not sitting here like last year. So that would not be good. In addition to the revenue sheets, you also have our summary of what the budget looks like, and this is a 14-page document, and it's got the line items grouped by function for our budget all the way through. And I'd like to also say, this is the school operating budget. This is not the whole encompassed budget. We will come back to you with the other funds that include grants and debt service and textbook and those types of things. This is just the meat of our budget, the school operating. So if you have any questions about this detail, you can certainly ask. And Dr. Weston's going to go over what's included. And then just for your reference, we did include 3 other sheets of paper that are color in the back. One of them is the required local effort. And as you can see on here for 25, the required local effort is 12.6 million. And right now the county funds us at 16.1. So, you know, they exceed that. We're very grateful that we're not having to watch that, because there are some divisions that skirt that every single year down to the penny. And also there's an SOQ funding, the SOQ funding positions, which we kind of talked about in our little session last month. I am working on an SOQ comparison for you, which will show you by position what the SOQ model calls for and what we actually have here. And I hope to have that to you very soon. And then the last thing I just wanted to touch on was the local composite index. Again, that is how we are funded from the state. Our local composite index is, how they refer to it is, it's your county's ability to pay. Our composite index currently is 0.2912, and it's going to 0.2978. So it went up slightly, okay, for the next biennium. And what that generally means is out of every dollar that's required to be spent on education, out of the, it's going to 0.2978, we are going to have to provide 29 cents, essentially, almost 30 cents on the dollar, and the state would provide 70. So as you can see, we definitely are in one of the, the lower composite index. It does get capped at 0.8, but this, does provide us with an abundance of funding from the state. And the county, is certainly helping us with the rest of it. So if you have any questions about that.
Tell them about how they come about figuring out.
Oh,
what's
yeah.
included in
Yeah,
the-
so what's included in how they calculate this, and it's calculated every biennium, but it's based on data that's 4 years old. So, what's going on right now will not impact our composite index until 4 years from now. So it's a little behind. But what goes into that is the property values in the county, the income tax collected in the county, business operations and revenues. I believe that's those are the main points. It's a formula that will take up half that wall.
Yeah.
So 4 years ago, we were just beginning COVID.
Yeah.
Was there any account taken for that?
I don't think so. I think that's probably why we're seeing not a large increase, here. It could be that the impact of that will be seen for, another biennium. Yeah. In addition, I'd like to point out that sometimes it's not all about what's going on here, but it's about what's going on here in relationship to what's going on in the other localities around the state. So is Dinwiddie growing faster than the majority of the localities in the state? Or are we, not growing as growing as fast? We also like to say that Fairfax County owns the composite index because very slight changes in anything going on up there skews the whole rest of the state because they're just so large. And yeah, and so, what happens up there, impacts the rest of the state greatly. But certainly we're okay. We're in a good position. There were some divisions that, jumped significantly. And when that happens, it does affect you. Like if we were to have jumped, like from 0.2912 to, 0.35, that would have a significant effect on us. So, yes. Any questions about what I provided to you? And as always, you can reach out at any time. Okay.
I just want to say, thank you so much. I just want to say that, you can see Christy's got 2 gigantic binders there, so she has all of the resources relative to anything finance and anything we've worked on. So you see they're all tabbed. She's ready to answer. Also, we have the other members of the cabinet, and so you have those documents in front of you that have the actual increased numbers. Those are not included by line item in my presentation, but they're there for your reference. So if there is something specific that you need more information about, any member of the cabinet certainly can help you to understand that. I'd just like to start to say that I know everything we do is driven by the Virginia Code, and certainly budget development is in the Virginia Code. And I'm required as the superintendent to prepare a budget that says to the county, here's what we need. So what I'm going to share with you this evening is a needs-based budget. We feel very confident that we've done a really great job in identifying what our needs are to ensure that we are able to retain the people that we have and to attract talent to our school district, but also, more importantly, to make sure that the success of our young people continues moving in the right direction. It's said that you can tell a lot about people and what they value by the way they spend their money. And so what you're also going to see tonight is that we are investing in people, and we are continuing to invest in things that are going to set our young people up for success, both in the short term and the long term. I would like to start by just celebrating. I really could go on forever to talk about what we like to call the Dinwiddie difference, and that it are some of the things that we're very proud of here in Dinwiddie County, and it really is it is attributed to the people that you see in the room and the people that aren't here with us, but it is the people in this organization that have made Dinwiddie the success that it certainly is. So I just wanted to highlight some of those. We're very fortunate, the graduation rate of 92.4%, number one in the region, for our region. What you're going to hear tonight is I'm going to recommend that we continue with our student support specialists at the high school. I do think that has a lot to do with having a person that really is working directly with our seniors and our high school students and having an administrative team that is very focused over there, starting in the 9th grade and making sure that we're setting young people up for success. You can see some of the others there. Back in 2014, 15% of our students were dropping out of school. And last year that number was 4%. We still have some challenges with, and it's not them not dropping out as seniors. Sometimes they drop out long before they even get to high school. We did lose, I won't say lose, but we did have students that dropped out over the pandemic that we weren't able to recover. So that was, difficult for us. But I feel like we're right on track and where we need to be, but we're not going to be satisfied until that number is 0%. We've talked about Encompass Learning Center. This evening, we talked about credit recovery and acceleration programs. We have those both at the middle school and the high school level. We have a lot of clubs and activities. That number continues to grow because what the research says is if you have things for kids to connect to, they tend to do better in school, right? And they tend to stay in school as well. Several of our schools have received recognition. Just this past year, Sunnyside and Midway Elementary School were named in the Virginia's top 40% of all elementary schools. And that's pretty phenomenal considering how many elementary schools are in the state of Virginia. Southside Elementary School and Sunnyside Elementary Schools both have been Title I distinguished schools. And then Sunnyside Elementary School received a Distinguished Achievement Award for exceeding state and federal benchmarks. And we always say that Sunnyside's kind of the best kept secret in the community. We've got well over 100 students right now taking college level classes. I'm really proud of the work that Dr. Clay and her team have done with expanding our partnership with Richard Bland this year. So we've got even more opportunities for our young people. Industry certifications, we do staff surveys every year and student surveys every year, and 94% of our staff and students say that this is a great place to work and learn, and we're really proud of that. We've been named a Division of Innovation. We've received awards for our workforce readiness. And then just last year, we received the School Division Leadership Award from the Southside Virginia Regional Technology Consortium. So just some of the things that we're very proud of, and certainly there are a lot of other things to be proud of here in Dinwiddie County as well. As you know, and we talked about this last month when we came together, that we have to comply with the state and federal laws. However, a lot of those mandates come either with no funding or with partial funding. And just to give you an example of some of those, Christy did provide you with the standards of quality. You can see that some of those are general education teachers. The regulations talk about math specialists. Now, we have math specialists in every one of our schools, but unfortunately, we're not performing low enough to receive funding for math specialists, even though we do have a great need to continue to meet all of our young people. We have had reading specialists at all of our levels for several years now, even before it was required that we do so. We have them even at the high school and the middle school level. And next year, with some of our all-in funding, we're going to add an additional reading specialist to our middle school. You can see with the resource, EL teachers, special education teachers, how they fund us is not really based on what our needs are. And then there's some other positions there as well. And then I'm going to talk to you in a minute about staff and teacher compensation. Even so, our community expects us to continue to provide quality service or high services. So in order to do that, we need to provide staffing levels above what the state says would be what we need to have in our schools, and that would be inclusive of school administrators and teachers and paraprofessionals, clerical, resource and security officers, nurses, social workers, and the like. We should also be providing choice. I feel strongly that there should be choices for our young people. I'd like them to choose to be at Dinwiddie County Public Schools, but I love the fact that we have regional programs for our young people to attend. Appreciate your comments relative to Rwani, but we also have other types of programs available to our young people. Maggie Walker, we have ARGS, we have Code RBA is an option for our young people as well. And we are expanding the electives that we had. If you had an opportunity to attend Thriving Gens at the high school recently, you got to see all the elective teachers basically having an elective fair, selling the types of electives the kinds of electives that we're offering to students at the high school level. Our advanced placement courses, dual enrollment, you're going to continue to see expansion in those areas. Transportation is not something that is currently funded by the Department of Education. And with 507 square miles, I can tell you it's a big part of our budget. However, our parents do require that. I mean, they need it and they expect it. And then finally, they expect us to have safe and updated facilities, and that does take a lot of money to maintain that. So when you're building the budget, the first place you start with is what enrollment. I just want to give you a sense of where we are. The enrollment of our English learners, our enrollment's changing. And so currently this school year, the last number was 122, but we always like to ask Penny, where are we in this moment? Because with any given week, we keep seeing increases in this area, and we do feel strongly that that will continue to change as the years move on. But right now we have 122 English learners in our school district. We also have 639 special education students. You can see that we took a little dip there in 21, 22, which was at the pandemic, but that we are recovering from that, and we are seeing more and more students with special needs, and with that comes the type of service, different services that they need, but also spacing. We've got to make sure that we have the classrooms to support them and the staff to support them. So here's what our enrollment looks like for all students. The light green is what it looks like in the fall for each year. And this is over the last 10 years to give you a sense of what enrollment has looked like in Dinwiddie County. And then, so basically, it looks like it's right just under 4,100 students, and that's what we budgeted for this year. We do feel like that we'll end up above 4,100 when we do it again in the spring. So just give you a sense of what our enrollment is looking like. We will be presenting to you, I believe, the enrollment study. We do have a draft of that report, and Mr. Walters and I have read through it, and he is in the process of working with the company to ask some specific questions. And I do believe they'll be coming, I don't know if they're going to be coming back or if Mr. Walters is going to present it, but there's a lot of very interesting information in there about enrollment for the next 10 years. But what I'm going to say to you is this, is that Dinwiddie County is changing, and our school district and our community is becoming a culturally diverse place to live. And the number of students whose first language was not English has tripled over the last decade. And that's pretty remarkable. Our kids speak 12 languages right now in our homes. And there was a time when that wasn't the case here in Dinwiddie County. So with that, we need to think about building a budget that meets the needs of all students. We're also currently a CEP district, and that means that all of our students qualify for free breakfast and free lunch. All right, so as Ms. Fleming talked to you about, here's what our revenue looks like currently. $58.2 million of revenue coming in. 70% of that is state revenue, and you can see so that's about $40 million. And then over here you see the federal. We don't expect to see any changes in that, but you can see the federal aid there. Other local monies that we will be receiving, we do get rent from Rivermont and other very small amount of money here in the community. And then finally, almost 30% or 29% would be from the county. And then this is what it's going to look like when it's broken down into all of the different areas. We are categorically funded, so that means that when we put a budget together, we have to put it into categories where we plan to spend it. What I've done for you with this particular chart is to show you that 70% of all of our money is going right back into instruction. So you can see 40 million, almost $41 million, is going directly into instruction. And then you can see there that the second highest area is maintenance. 13% of our budget is about maintenance. And as you can imagine, with aging facilities, it certainly does take a lot of money to take care of those facilities. Also, and I would say that Mr. Walters and his team are doing a great job thinking about how can we look to the future and what would maintenance look like in the future. And I think he really is doing a great job updating our processes and our systems. The next one there would be technology. 4% of our budget is in technology, $2.5 million. The next would be transportation. You can see there, about 7% of our budget goes to transportation. And then, let's see, attendance and health is about 3% of the budget. And then finally, 3% of our budget is administration. And you can see that for this particular budget, there's going to be a decrease in the administration line. All right, so this is what the breakdown looks like, and with specific numbers. And what I've given you here is what we anticipate the revenue or change to look like for this particular budget cycle. We expect to see an additional $73,000 of local revenue. I would like to also commend Mr. Walters for doing the due diligence of looking at the rents that we receive and was able to, I guess, negotiate and with Rivermont, and so we're going to see some increases in that area. We are anticipating, as Ms. Fleming said, an additional $1.2 million or $1.3 million in state revenue. What we're going to be asking for is an additional $585,000 from the county. And I'm going to show you where that is, and we don't expect to see any additional monies in federal coming. On the right-hand side, you're going to see where we're spending that money. I'm going to share with you the technical adjustments that we anticipate making in this budget. Compensation is going to be a large part of what we want to spend this budget on, about $1.3 million. It's really just about exactly what we're getting from state revenue we'd like to spend on compensation. But then that'd be great if we didn't have anything else to do. But as you can see, we have some required increases. That's about $372,000. We do need to maintain some service levels, and I'm going to explain those to you as well. And then we made about $300,000 in other reductions across the budget. And what we expect to see is a change in our budget, $1.9 million. So I'd like to just explain those to you now, and then I'll go into them a little bit in detail. So here are the three areas. In the technical updates and compensation, the first one is there's going to be an adjustment to VRS. There is a reduction in that area for the upcoming year. That's always good because it usually is an increase. So again, we're thankful for that there's a reduction. I am recommending that we absorb 6 full-time equivalent positions that are currently paid for out of a grant. 4 of those positions are paid out of the CARES grant, and then 2 positions were paid out of the special education grant. And so I'm going to ask for those to be absorbed in the operating budget. Reclassification of our instructional assistants, our paraprofessionals. They are currently paid certainly at a lower rate than the work. We've done some re-looking at the work that they do, and we do consider them to be instructional in nature. So I am recommending that we move those to a different grade, which will increase their salaries and also increase the cost to the budget. And then I'm also recommending a 3% increase for all employees. As you can remember, the governor did not allow for any compensation increase. He only allowed for a 1% bonus. And I'm going to show you that in just a minute. So here's some of the required increases, and you'll see those on that summary that Ms. Fleming provided you. And if you have specific questions, try to answer them for you, or have other people here that can answer specifically. Our custodial contract, we're in the process of bidding that. That has closed, and I know that the team is now working to identify who is going to be what organization is going to receive that contract. We do anticipate that we will be making that recommendation in April. However, we did put an increase in the budget based on what our numbers were looking like in the fall for the upcoming school year. So that is an increase, I think, and we certainly can speak to that. I think it was like $50,000 or $60,000 from last year's budget. Homebound is increasing. We have a number of our young people that are being served at home. And this year, I think we've already exceeded what we had budgeted for last year. And so we feel like we need to put more money in the budget for next year. And our young people are at home for a lot of different reasons. Sometimes it's about illnesses and the like, but we have to be able to support the people that support the young people from home. We have seen an increase in our utilities. I don't know if you're seeing that at home. But we have to allow for that. I will tell you this, that at Southside Elementary School, we're seeing a decrease in our utilities there. And that, I believe, has to do with the lighting system that we're in the process of putting in there. So even though we've only done half of the building, we are seeing a decrease in what the bill looks like. So we think that once we get the rest of it in this summer, we'll see even more of a decrease there. Software increases, this has to do with a lot of the systems we have in place, like our payroll systems, our student information system. So a lot of it is being pushed out to us or what companies are requiring increases for the upcoming school year. We do have increases to our regional programs. I'm going to show you which ones we're going to see increases. We have local match requirements. I believe that Ms. Fleming referenced that as well. For a number of our grants and the like that we have to. The biggest one of the largest ones is textbook for this upcoming school year. We are in the process, Dr. Clay and her team are in the process of taking on a K through 12 literacy overhaul for our school system. And part of that will require some curriculum writing, which we need to put monies in the budget to support that. But in addition to doing that, they are taking on almost all of the core areas. Contracted services and contracted building maintenance, both of these have to do with, in the maintenance department, that we're seeing increases in places like our landscaping services, or it could be the HVAC system that we have contracts with, and these are the increases from those companies. And then physical therapy, we are putting an additional $40,000 in the budget to cover the cost of students' IEPs that we need to provide physical therapy services to. Finally, under being able to maintain service levels, providing tutors for our students at the secondary level. So in addition to the teachers that we have to provide services to them during the school day, we also are hiring people that are bilingual to work with young people specifically at the high school level and middle school level. Early childhood, this is to help to support, now we have early childhood at all of our elementary school, and this is to support that programming. Bilingual support, this is for a service to provide bilingual support to our families. So we want to maintain that for this school year. And then there are going to be 4.5 new positions that I'm recommending for this budget. Okay. Right, so under technical adjustments, I did speak to the VRS rate and methodology updates. So, there are some changes there which did result in a decrease in the amount of money that we're having to spend on VRS, which is great for us. And then here are the positions that I spoke to, the 6 positions that I'm asking for us to move over to the operating budget. The first one is the student support specialist that's currently being paid from CARES as at the high school level. I would like to maintain that position at the high school level and move it over out of CARES. We have a floating nurse that moves from school to school and also is able to cover if any one of our nurses is out, which has been specific care, has been very helpful, especially when we have our nurses out. We have a lot of vulnerable children, and this way we don't leave a school without having somebody there to care for young people. A teacher position that's currently being paid out of CARES, we'd like to move that into the operating budget for Encompass Learning Center. The coordinator for transportation, which has been extremely helpful in managing our transportation department. And then finally, the special education teacher and paraprofessional that were currently paid out of the special ed regional grant. Here's the compensation, 3% for all employees, and I've broken it down there so you could see exactly what that looks like. I would like to applaud the board. I think for the past 6 or 7 years, every year, we've been able to get a increase for our teachers, specifically the starting pay for our teachers, starting salary for our teachers, as well as increases. So you can see there, I'm recommending that the starting salary for teachers go to $53,560. And then the 3% increase would cost us about $757,000 for the teachers' increase. For all other employees, I think at one point we talked even as a board about the starting salary, and we are not right now recommending any pay increase in minimum salary. I will tell you that there are a lot of surrounding districts that are moving to $14 and $15 an hour, so that makes it very difficult when we're all competing for the same people. But right now, we are not recommending that. But for the rest of the positions, we're recommending the 3% increase, which would be at a cost of $421,000. And then to reclassify our paraprofessionals, we have about 70 paraprofessionals currently. This would move them up 2 grades, and that would be at a cost of $110,000. And what I've provided for you at the bottom is to show you the amount of money we received in the governor's budget for compensation. We can apply the $228,000 to this compensation because we are recommending to do more for our employees. And so that would help to offset some of those costs. But you can see there in the House and the Senate budget, which I believe Christy did reference for us, you can see how much more money we would receive if either one of them come through with the 3%, which would help us greatly. Just to give you a sense of where our current teacher salary is, you can see that Dinwiddie's right in the middle currently, but this would move us up to 53. So it looks like it would move us closer to the top, but I'm going to tell you that everybody is in the same place. Henrico is a school district that they do things very differently there. They are all of their salary increases are attached to what the county does. So they're usually very, very large. And same with Richmond City, theirs are usually very, very large as well. But even if ours moves up to the 53.5, which would put us right next to Prince George, I'm certain that other districts are looking to do the same thing. I do know that Chesterfield is recommending a 4% increase. Goochland is recommending a 5% increase. Prince George is recommending a 3% increase. And so it's anywhere from 3 to 5, most school districts are recommending. So that will change some of these numbers for the upcoming school year. Here are required increases, and once again, you can see these in the summary document. Our custodial contract, which I talked to you about, homebound services, we did double that amount that's in our budget for this upcoming school year. The regional programs where we do anticipate or already know there's going to be an increase. We have not received the number from Rwanda yet. That budget will be presented to the board next week. And so, but we do anticipate there being an increase there for salaries, but also we are going to be adding the plumbing program. We're going to be moving it into the operating budget, and we do anticipate seeing additional students go there. So there'll be a slight increase at Rwanda, if nothing more. Code RVA, there's an increase going to Code RVA. Maggie Walker, slight increase there. They're trying to get their teacher salaries in line. And then also we have an additional student that's going to Maggie Walker next year, and we're really happy about that. I will tell you that what we try to do is when students apply to go to Maggie Walker or ARGS or Code RVA or any school, if they qualify to go, we're going to find a way to get them there. So anybody who gets the letter says you're not going, it's because that they have not met the qualifications to go there. We're always going to find a way to get them there. And I'm really proud about that. Excuse me. The local match for textbooks, we talked about curriculum writing, and I think the other things there we did talk about, and finally the physical therapy. All right, to maintain our service levels, thank you so much.
I could throw it, but
You could throw it like we're at home. I'm sorry. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay. All right. The early childhood support to make certain that we can maintain what we're providing currently. I will tell you, we have a meeting that's coming soon with the Head Start. And as you know, Mr. Tyler and his team came forward to talk to us about us providing support. What I'm going to say to you all, and do plan to tell him in this meeting, is that while I can stand behind him and stand to the county and say I would support anything you all could provide to him, we cannot provide any support through our budget. What happened with, something happened with the Head Start reporting, and they over-reported students. And so when they over-reported students, it cost us money. So because they over-reported their 4-year-olds, it cost us $40,000. So because we now have to cover that, we cannot support anything he needs. But certainly, I want to be able to say to the Board of Supervisors, I would support them helping him with his transportation if they so feel the need to do so. Every other community does so through their Board of Supervisors and not through the local school board. And I have been able to verify that. So bilingual support, we talked about that being a great need, and I know we saw that on our visits. So we did feel strongly that we need to provide that for our young people. We also want to be able to provide substitutes. We are doing the site-based substitutes right now, and we're relooking at, we want to be able to provide long-term substitutes and the pay that they deserve. And then the new positions, these are the new positions that we're recommending this year. I really applaud Ms. Branch and what she's been trying to do to try to grow our own. And so part of that, this is one grant that she's been working on. And so it requires us to pay for a teacher. And so that you can see there, this is a grant that she was able to get for us. So we'll have a teacher, and we'll be basically growing our own teacher for the upcoming school year, and we'll pay for that. And she's got more things that she's working on along those lines. We're recommending a maintenance technician. Part of the plan is for the new custodial contract is that we don't turn all of our custodial services over to a contracted service, but yet we have a hybrid. So what we would do is have a site-based person who works for Dinwiddie County for us, and they would oversee the building level services of the contractual partner. So that we're not just saying, well, that's, the company that we've hired to do it. We do feel like that will change the level of services that we're seeing in our buildings, and also create some quality controls across the school district. We're asking for a part-time speech language pathologist to help us with the caseloads that we have currently. We're also recommending an additional technology position. Mr. Ampey and his team lost 2 positions over the course of the past couple of years. I will tell you that we are a 1-to-1 district, but in addition to the Chromebooks, we have so much technology in this building that we do need to have an additional person to help us to take care of our equipment. And then finally, I'm recommending an additional student support specialist position at the middle school. We're going to be bringing a plan to you about the middle school in general, and this is part of that recommendation. We talked about the EL tutors and then also professional development, and that is the professional development for our entire district and helping us support our conference that we do to open the school year each year. All right, so that's what's in the budget, and I guess I could stop right there before I go on to what's not in the budget. So if you have questions about anything that's in the budget, or maybe something you didn't see in the budget and you're wondering why you didn't see it in the budget, or something that any member of the team can help to expand on, those are the things that are currently in there. Happy to answer those questions. I mean, you can keep thinking if you'd like. I just needed to take a, yes.
Yeah, so I had a question about the custodial staff. Is there a reason why, or like a requirement for us to contract them opposed to having them as employees of DCPS? Like how does that work?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So many years ago, we did contract service. Many years ago, we had custodial employees. And my understanding, and I don't want to speak because I wasn't here then, but my understanding was it became that we had a great number of custodial employees, and it was, do you want to speak to it, Christy, or are you waiting to see what I'm going to say?
No,
Okay.
go ahead.
And we had a great number of, so we tried to figure out if the investment we were making, we were getting the return on that investment. And so we opted to go in more of a contractual way to help to control for costs, because I think it became very expensive for what we were paying.
Yes, ma'am.
Right.
Actually, when the new high school and Sutherland were built,
Okay,
that was when we started that process. So when those two buildings were built, we went all with the contracted services. But then we did a cost analysis, and there was a huge savings. It was it was between the new buildings opening in 2012, I think, is when we converted all but Midway. And it was a huge savings to go contracted services, as opposed to of our own custodians.
yeah,
And so they, provided everything,
Right.
including all the equipment.
Well,
You know-
my understanding during that time was, one of the reasons that it was so efficient was because they were a national company and they bought toilet paper and wax by the trainload.
yeah.
Right.
We were buying toilet paper and wax for 7 schools and cleaning supplies, and so they were getting the stuff so much cheaper
Right.
than we
And,
were.
'Cause you can get it in
and
bulk.
we were technically overstaffed at every
Yes.
school. And I can give you an example. I believe the middle school had like 17 custodians, which would have been historic Southside at that time. So we really had, when we started looking at it, it was a substantial cost savings to go to the contracted services, and I will say too that there wasn't a single custodian that actually lost their job.
Right,
So we made sure that
Yeah.
all of them had a job, and kept their salaries or whatever. And many of them retired. I mean, most of them were retired from somewhere
Right.
else anyway, and just working here. So it wasn't like we, took all of our custodians and dumped them out, because we did it in a transitional time period too.
And Mr. Brown, I was also going to say too that, and that's one of the things that we are trying to do with every decision that we make is, let's think about the next 10 years, because we're going to make a decision for today, but it also is going to impact the people that come behind us in the next 5 and 10 years. So let's always think about the cost. This might sound like a great deal in this moment, but maybe in 10 years, it's not going to be such a great deal. And so we've already been with this particular company. It's been how long? 16 years. And so at no point did we kind of step out of it and say, is this the right relation? And so we really have been trying to figure out, is this the right model still for us? What's the benefits of having our own employees? And I will say that we do have our own employees, like at Midway, do a phenomenal job. And so maybe there is a benefit of having some hybrid approach to this, or maybe we start working back toward eventually taking on our own employees. So Mr. Walters and his team have been really studying this to see if this is the right model moving forward, because we really hadn't looked at it in that long.
And for like their benefits and like healthcare, PTO,
Yes.
et cetera, is that taken care of by the company we're
Yes.
contracted
Yes.
to? Or,
And so that's, when you talk about what it was costing us, cost her more than just it's the equipment, it's the supplies, but it's also the personnel, it is the leave and things like that, right?
and it's
Retirement.
up to par with what we're doing for DCPS staff,
Mm-hmm.
like as far as okay,
Well,
accrual for your
I would-
PTO and
I don't think so.
We don't really have they give us a lump sum, this is what we'll charge you to clean each building. But as far as what they pay their staff, I'm looking through the proposals now, and that information is in there. But what Service Solutions pay their staff, we could certainly request it, but it was not something they gave to us.
Yeah.
Right.
They were their employees. So there's some personnel issues with that too. But it looks like, from what I've seen, I've looked at about 5 proposals. They pay their employees in some cases better than we do. Just because they're a national company and they have a lot more experience with that kind of stuff. So they have people who come into the field, with 15, 20 years of experience, so they get paid accordingly.
thank you.
So we'll be bringing back to you all by April.
Dr. Weston,
Yeah.
I appreciate what you have done to, for the grant-funded positions. I see where you have tried to either move people or absorb positions. I'm curious, do you know of, or how many are there that are looking at losing their jobs?
0.
0.
Yes.
That's amazing.
Well, we have been throughout the entire process, so if someone left and we could move them over to the operating budget, we didn't wait. We went ahead and moved them over and not, even though we knew it was being grant funded, we said, let's get them out of there now because we've got to have a position for them to go into. So we've been doing it all along the way. So
So
so 0 people will lose their job.
For example, the floating nurse, we're
No
not
one's-
losing, but
no
there's one
one's-
retiring and then,
Well, one we hired already because
Okay.
the middle school nurse retired. And so she applied for that job, and so we were able
That's
to
what-
move her
okay,
from the
gotcha.
floater job into that job, and that left one additional floater. So that's why we're recommending to
That's
keep
great.
the additional floater.
That's
But
great.
0 people will
I
lose their
appreciate it. I
job.
feel compassion for somebody that would lose a
Yeah,
job
yeah.
through no fault of their own, just simply because grant funding. So I
Absolutely.
appreciate what you did there.
Yes.
So,
So no one will lose their job, we're determined.
great.
Yes. Yes, and there are school districts that are in not that, because they have so many people in those grants. It's a lot. Yeah. Other questions that I can answer before I go in and tell you what's not in the budget? Okay. So currently, what's not in the budget, just to let you know, this is what the budget looks like in this moment in time. It could change if the General Assembly comes back. If anything happens, the budget could change. But this is where we're at in this moment. But what's currently not in the budget are any recommendations from the enrollment study, from the exceptional education study, from the transportation study, and from the literacy plan. So we could come back at any given time and say, we'd like to do this, we need additional personnel here, and that because these came out of these studies that we're doing. And as we've shared, as Dr. Clay shared before, and others have shared, and Mr. Walters has shared, these studies are, the reason we're doing these studies is because we do want to make sure that we have the right people in place, the right number of people in place, that we are supporting them in the way we need to support them and the like. So it could be that it will change our budget dramatically for the positive in all of these areas. So here are some things that we would like to consider pending additional funding. But just note at the bottom there, we're only going to reevaluate this if there's additional state funding with no additional mandated services. So sometimes they can say, we're going to give you, like she said, the at-risk funding, but it could come back with a paragraph that says you can only spend it on this. So, but what we'd like to do, one would be we would like to take a look at hard to staff. Right now, our secondary level is where the hard to staff is. And specifically the middle school as a whole. Middle school is hard to staff. It's where the largest number of our provisionally licensed and probationary teachers are. And also it's hard at the secondary level because that's where you actually have to be certified in the content area in order to teach it. So what we're hoping that we can explore is maybe a pay differential for people that choose to work at the middle school and choose to come to Dinwiddie County, and also to pay a pay differential for the people that are in those core areas that I've identified there. The other would be some fuel. We did talk back and forth about whether or not we would put more money in there for fuel, but right now we level funded it. Could be that we'd have to come back for fuel. Long-term substitute pay, we've talked about whether or not that should change. And then also compensation, whether or not we would raise the minimum wage in order to be more competitive. And then a 5% increase for teachers and staff to be more competitive across the region, which would be a substantial increase. And then reclassification of other positions similar to what we're recommending for the paraprofessionals. Here's some other things to be considered pending additional funding. Currently, the health insurance is a 4.5% increase, and you did not hear me say that we put that into the budget this time. The reason being is because we're trying to balance the budget. We're trying to get it to a reasonable number to ask the county for. So right now, the health insurance is being pushed out to the employee. Mr. Wells did put together those numbers for us, and the increase per employee, it was a range, $11 a month to $100, depending.
111, I think.
Something, so depending upon whether it's a family plan or an individual plan. So we're looking at that hard. That would be an area that we probably would try to put back into the budget. Currently, our budget, you all do support about almost $6 million of health insurance for employees. After-school tutoring is a place where we did not allow for in this budget. Promethean boards, we got that on hold currently. And then here's some positions that were asked for, but yet we put them on hold. Another maintenance technician, you saw that we did recommend one. A maintenance tech 4, Mr. Davis recommended one for HVAC because of the demands in that area. An exceptional education, a coordinator at the high school, Title IX investigator. Ms. Branch was able to figure out a way on her team to cross-train some individuals. And then currently, we're waiting to hear back on grant funding for a security office, 2 security officers and a school resource officer. So if we do not get the grant funds for that, we will have to go back to the county to ask for those monies. Right. So just to show you what that budget summary looks like. I just wanted to give you a sense of, for the past 10 years, what the state budget has looked like over time, back from 2014 to 15 to now, the amount of money that we've received. And then also to show you the same for the county. And as Ms. Fleming did share with you, we are very fortunate to live in a county that does support the school system, that certainly does understand the importance of the schools when you're talking about the health of a community. And we're very fortunate in that manner. I just would like to say to you in closing that, as we embarked upon this process, some of our legislative positions are to continue to enhance the funding of K-12 education, but to also come up with some expectations for future funding. So as we're talking to our delegates and senators, here are the things we want them to do in a public school setting, invest in our workforce, and then finally for us to collaborate with our county government. And I just wanted to remind you about the JLARC study that I did share with you, I believe it was last month or 2 months ago, that as you talk to our local representatives, things that you can, in that summary, this just highlights some of those. Basically what it said was that, in Virginia, we received less funding than other states that are comparable to us, and that the SOQ formula does not account for the needs of our school districts. And so I will say that our delegates, our senators, are very supportive of public education. I think it showed up in the General Assembly budgets. And then once again, that the formula they use to determine whether or not we are, the funding that we do get is really based on back from the late 2000s. So we really need them to get with where we are in this current, where our needs are currently. And then finally, there's just a lot of outdated processes, a lot of outdated calculations that they use to determine how they fund our schools. And so we need them to think about that when they're making those recommendations and making those decisions relative to budget moving forward. So I'm requesting an additional $585,827 in local transfer for the operating budget, and this does not include capital projects. That's going to be later. So ongoing one-time support for capital improvement projects and major maintenance and other needs outside the budget process is continuing. And once again, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. And just as the next step, we're just gathering stakeholder input, anybody that has input about what's in the budget, what's not in the budget, what they'd like to see in the budget. Either from our internal community, our staff. Christy and I do tend to go school to school to share the budget with folks, or our external community. And then on March the 13th, we will be presenting this in a joint session with the Board of Supervisors, where you all will sit at a table with the Board of Supervisors, and we'll talk about this budget together.
We don't know a time for that yet, do we? Or do we?
Do we have a time? No. It's typically 6. It's typically like 6 o'clock, or
March the 13th.
that's the day of our board meeting. Is that correct?
13th is a Wednesday.
Oh, excuse me, it's the 12th then. And that's funny. I talked to Mr. Massengill today. He told me it was the 12th, and I said, no, it's the 13th. It's the 12th. It's the day of our board meeting. And it'll be at is it East Side this year, Bonnie, or?
Received any information?
Okay.
Yeah, when I spoke to Ms. Howard, she said it was gonna be on that day. But
Okay.
She didn't say what time, but
Okay.
it's typically.
So it's
at
March
6
12th.
At East Side.
It's 6.
In the last few years.
Yeah, it's at East Side. typically.
Will we be having our school board meeting and then the joint
Mhm.
meeting with them?
Mhm.
The school board meeting will still be here though.
That is
We're
correct.
Moving to East Side
Yes.
for-
Mhm. Yeah, and we usually stop in enough time for you all to eat, and then we travel there.
If I understand correctly, what you said, we're asking them for an additional $500,000+
From last year.
on
Mhm.
top of that.
Mhm.
And do we have any idea of how they feel about that yet? Or do they
I
even
did
hold
speak
on?
with Mr. Massengill. I told him that once I had the opportunity to present it to you all, that I would send it over to him as well. I did talk with him about my whys behind it and where I was with everything, and he just appreciated, you know, the heads up, and, you know, certainly would be reaching out to the board. We talked about the General Assembly and where they were, and he was very optimistic, and,
Yeah.
but I don't have a sense of the board, so.
They didn't give you any clues.
No, and we're going to a meeting next week with Davenport, and to hear about the state of, you know, the county and financials. So that'll be interesting as well. I think that that will lend itself to what they're able to do in the coming year.
Are there questions to Dr. Weston about the budget? Thank you for
Thank
your
you
hard
so
work.
much. No,
and
thank you.
Thank you for
Thank
all
the
the
team.
pieces
It's a
and
team.
parts that come into that.
Yes, it's a great team.
Okay. Anybody comments that you need to make? Anything? It's no offense to anybody, it's information overload. We'll have to go home and read it, but we really do thank you for all your hard work. Something, anybody have anything to say? Okay, since adjournment is listed on the agenda, we can say, hearing no objections, we are now ready to adjourn.